Hello, this is again Dr. Jonathan Bentovish. Today is a special day, the beginning of Chodesh Iyar and the end of Chodesh Nisan, or just after Chodesh Nisan, the end of Chodesh Nisan, but it's considered already the head of Iyar. And as we know, Chodesh Nisan is a month of redemption, in which the Jewish people left the Galus of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, and very symbolically, the topic of today's lecture is living in a world of Geulah. And this is obviously following the publication of God's Physics book published by iUniverse.com. There's been over 80 peer-reviewed scientific articles that have been published, essentially pointing at the new God's Physics paradigm, scientific paradigm, as the new scientific paradigm for 21st century physics. And as I spoke in the past, we stand at a very exciting point historically, because this point in time is really equivalent to Einstein's revolution 100 years ago. Specifically, by the way, Eddington's famous British astronomer who verified and validated one of the unique critical predictions of Einstein's general relativity theory, which was found to be more valid than the predictions of the preceding Newtonian mechanics of 19th century physics. And when Eddington verified and validated the unique critical prediction of Einstein's general relativity theory, that was during the solar eclipse of 1919. The minute that occurred, and it was clear that the predictions of general relativity theory were validated as more accurate than the predictions of Newtonian mechanics, then overnight pretty much general relativity theory became the new acceptable and accepted paradigm, scientific paradigm for 20th century physics. And we stand at precisely an equivalent point, because right now there's been two initial empirical validations of two critical predictions of God's physics new paradigm, which have been found to be more valid than the predictions of the preceding paradigm, which I call the material causal paradigm of relativity theory and quantum mechanics of the last century. In other words, we stand at the point where it's clear that God's physics new theory, new paradigm is becoming the new paradigm for 21st century physics. And it includes, by the way, relativity theory and quantum mechanics as special cases. I give the example to explain how science evolves according to Thomas Kuhn, the famous philosopher of science. And I give the example of our understanding, a person being born in a room, and all they know of the world is that confined room, and then they hear knocks on the door, or something is piercing the wall, and they have to open the door and realize that the room exists, but it exists as part of, or as a special case within the house. And then from the house to the neighborhood to the city, and then to the land, country, etc. So that's like an expansion of our scientific understanding. And each time we have to do this opening of a door, opening of the room to a house, the house to a neighborhood, etc. That is a metaphor for what Thomas Kuhn is telling us, essentially that what happens during these times is a paradigmatic shift from the old paradigm, the old standard paradigm, to which reaches the limits of its usefulness, like Newtonian mechanics stumbled across or got to the point where it had certain significant problems. It couldn't explain where the purely hypothetical ether concept exists. It couldn't be verified. There was a contradiction between Newtonian mechanics and Maxwellian theory, and it became very clear that Newtonian mechanics is not good enough. It can't explain a whole series of phenomena And then came relativity theory, which was able to resolve the contradiction between Maxwellian theory and Newtonian mechanics, was able to discard the ether concept, and essentially brought about a new, much broader understanding in which Newtonian mechanics was just a special case. And we stand at exactly an equivalent point, because right now the old paradigm of 20th century physics, which is relativity theory and quantum mechanics, I characterize, or I suggested that they both comprise the old paradigm, which I call the material causal paradigm. And the material causal paradigm of relativity theory and quantum mechanics of the last century, of 20th century physics, has also reached the ends or the limits of its usefulness. There seems to be a contradiction between relativity theory about the macroscopic universe and quantum mechanics about the microscopic subatomic realm. So that's an impossible situation. Essentially, the old material causal paradigm cannot explain a major phenomenon, which is the accelerated expansion of the universe. When we look at the galaxies and we see that they're drifting apart, and the rate of their expansion, they're running apart from each other, is becoming greater and greater. To explain that, the old model has to assume the existence of purely hypothetical dark matter, dark energy, just like the ether concept in Einstein's case in Newtonian mechanics was also a purely hypothetical concept. It couldn't be found, and then Einstein had to discard it when he suggested the new relativity theory. And we stand at the same point, because essentially dark matter, dark energy have been chased after, so to speak, and there's been 2 full decades of investigations and experimentations, intensive experimentations, to try and find that elusive dark matter and dark energy purely hypothetical concepts. And nobody was able to do that. Excuse me. And somewhat, and I mentioned in the previous presentations that science has reached such a crisis, a paradigmatic crisis, that Scientific American, one of the most famous and lucrative scientific journals, came out recently with, over the last 6 months, with 2 articles, one essentially stating, it was called The Last Stand of Dark Matter, Dark Energy, essentially saying that if after 2 decades, full decades of experimentation, nobody was able to detect those purely hypothetical dark matter, dark energy concepts, then it's almost time to discard them. There may be some further attempts, but we're reaching the end of the rope, so to speak, of waiting and assuming and imagining that there is those dark matter, dark energy concepts where they cannot be found. Another article also talking about the possibility of certain galaxies not having dark matter, dark energy at all. So we're at the point where the old material causal paradigm of relativity theory and quantum mechanics has reached the end of its usefulness, and we now have to open the door of the house to the neighborhood, find a new paradigm, that's the new God's physics paradigm, which can resolve the apparent inconsistency between relativity theory and quantum mechanics. That's been shown now in over 80 peer-reviewed articles, that the new God's physics paradigm is able to harmonize and resolve the apparent theoretical inconsistency between relativity theory and quantum mechanics. The new God's physics paradigm also discarded dark matter, dark energy as superfluous, as non-existent, exactly in the same manner that Einstein discarded the ether concept, the purely hypothetical ether concept, as non-existent, as superfluous. And the big test, so to speak, and the big victory now of God's physics new paradigm is the fact that just as Einstein's theory was validated and accepted across the board by the scientific community, the minute that one critical prediction of Einstein's general relativity theory was validated by Eddington and shown to be more valid than the corresponding prediction of Newtonian mechanics. So we're standing at the same point, because as I explained in previous presentations, there's been now 2, not 1, but 2 validations of 2 critical predictions of God's physics new paradigm. And these validations of God's physics new paradigm both one about the non-continuous accelerated rate of expansion of the universe as seen or as supported, as validated by what's called, or what I call, the cosmological astronomical gap in the universe's rate of expansion. That supports one of the critical predictions of God's physics new paradigm about the non-continuous accelerated rate of expansion of the universe, generally and more specifically during specific times such as the Jewish Rosh Hashanah 2 days time interval, in which, through or based on a collective human consciousness focus hypothesis or postulate, essentially saying that whenever you have a group of people, a large group of individual human beings focusing on this singular higher ordered universal consciousness principle, I'll get into that because that's one of the major discoveries made by God's physics new paradigm. But in any event, one of the predictions of God's physics paradigm has been validated too. One is the non-continuous accelerated expansion of the universe, and I called, and I'm still calling, cosmologists, astronomers to test a more specific, direct prediction, unique critical prediction regarding the fact that this non-continuous accelerated expansion occurs during the Jewish Rosh Hashanah 2 days time interval, in which there is a collective human consciousness of millions of Jews around the world focusing on this singular higher ordered universal consciousness principle, which is a key postulate of God's physics paradigm. And the other one was about the proton radius puzzle. I won't get into that, but that's another indication where God's physics prediction is aligned and is validated with the proton radius puzzle, essentially indicating that when you take a hydrogen atom with a standard hydrogen atom with an electron encircling the proton, and you compare that at the nucleus, and you compare that to an equivalent situation in which the electron is replaced by a much more massive muon particle, and then in the case of the muon particle, the radius of the proton shrinks, and that cannot be explained by quantum mechanics, but it is predicted by God's physics new paradigm. Again, I don't want to get into this right now, but these are two indications already of the fact that God's physics new paradigm has been found to be more valid than the predictions of both relativity theory, in the case of the non-continuous accelerated expansion of the universe, and more accurate than quantum mechanics prediction, which again is puzzled, cannot explain. Quantum mechanics cannot explain the proton radius puzzle, but the proton radius puzzle indirectly supports and validates the prediction of God's physics paradigm. So we stand at a very exciting historic point in which it's clear that God's physics new paradigm is more successful and has to be accepted as the new paradigm for 21st century physics. Now what I want to talk about, again, for those that have not seen previous presentations, I just want to explain very briefly what the major difference is, what's a major discovery made by God's physics, and how it differs from the old paradigm. So let's begin with the old paradigm. The old paradigm of 20th century physics, I call it the material causal paradigm, assumed that everything in the universe is the result of cause and effect, material interaction between certain elements or physical material elements, and that interaction causes certain phenomena to occur. Classical example of that would be the Big Bang model, in which the general relativity theory assumes that it's just the direct interaction of an initial nuclear event, the Big Bang nuclear event, that then caused or created all matter, mass, energy, suns, galaxies, and the impetus for the expansion, accelerated rate of expansion in the universe. That's cause and effect. It's assuming that the universe was created by an initial Big Bang nuclear event that then caused or created the sun galaxies and set them on their journey to expand and run away from each other, so to speak. That's a material causal assumption. Okay, and that material causal assumption applies not just to general relativity theory like in the Big Bang model, but also to quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics also assumes that any subatomic phenomena or target particle can be only determined by its direct interactions with another corresponding subatomic probe element. And then that causes the collapse of the target assumed probability wave function into a singular complementary space, energy, time, mass value. But in any case, in any event, both theories, relativity theory and quantum mechanics, again about the macroscopic universe or the microscopic subatomic realm, they both share the basic assumption, which is a material causal assumption, that everything in the universe operates by cause and effect and direct or indirect material interactions. The new paradigm, again, that the usefulness of that old material causal paradigm has reached the ends of its, the limits of its usefulness because of the contradiction between relativity theory and quantum mechanics, because of the fact that the old material causal paradigm cannot explain where 90% up to 90% of all the mass and energy in the universe, where they exist. They're assumed to comprise dark matter, dark energy, but those cannot be found. So the old material causal paradigm of relativity theory and quantum mechanics is crashing, or it's reached the paradigmatic crisis that then, which is, we said, like the room being open into a house, or the house being opened into a neighborhood. And that has led to God's physics new paradigm. We said that God's physics new paradigm already has two initial empirical validations of two critical predictions that are unique to God's physics paradigm. But I want to explain now the difference between the old paradigm, which is, we said, material causal, everything happens by cause and effect, material interactions, to the new model. The new model of God's physics paradigm, one of the key discoveries, tantalizing discoveries of this new God's physics paradigm, is that in order to unify and resolve the apparent inconsistencies between relativity theory and quantum mechanics, we have to assume, and really God's physics is discovering, the existence of a singular, higher ordered, what I called universal computational / consciousness principle. So that universal UCP, universal computational consciousness principle, that UCP is assumed to compute simultaneously the whole universe for a very brief period of time. It's given the rate at which the UCP computes the whole universe as a series of what I call universal frames, somewhat like in a film progression, cinematic film progression, where we have a series of frames, but to our bare naked eye we see a reality. We see a plane zooming through the sky, we see birds flying, we see people walking. It seems like a very real reality, but really that reality is broken down and is created by a series of still frames. So somewhat similar, and I used actually the cinematic film metaphor because there is quite a lot of similarities. It's not identical, there are differences, but it does pacify our mind because it does have a lot of similarities. So the idea is that this UCP is creating at each trillionth of a second, many trillions of times per second, it's creating a universal frame of the whole universe simultaneously. All the points in the universe, the whole frame is created simultaneously. By the way, the same way that the cinematic film, each picture, the whole picture with the trees, the animals, the plants, the human beings, the planes, etc., everything is presented at the same time for each frame. So because this, so one of the key discoveries made by this new God's physics paradigm is the fact that we have this singular higher ordered UCP that creates a series of frames, universal frames, and these series of universal frames exist, it creates them simultaneously, and they exist for a trillionth, etc. of a second, and then they dissolve back into the UCP, and then the UCP creates another frame, by the way, a little bit bigger, larger than the previous frame, and it goes on. To our naked eye, it seems like the universe is a real reality, but according and a consistent reality that exists, continuously. But according to the new God's physics paradigm, that's not the case. According to the new God's physics paradigm, the whole universe is really created by a series of frames, and those series of frames they exist for a very short period of time, and the universe dissolves between one frame and another. So the new God's physics paradigm starts changing and altering our perception and understanding of the universe. The universe does not exist as a stable phenomena. It's actually being created, dissolved, recreated, and evolved so many trillions of times per second. Excuse me. Now, so that's one key difference. That and let me explain that. So what that means is that because the universe is created as a series of frames, and because the universe dissolves between one frame and another back to the UCP, the new God's physics paradigm is also called an acausal computation paradigm. In other words, it's telling us that there cannot really be cause and effect. There cannot be any material causal interactions, because think about the fact that every universal frame, all the points in all the atoms, all of the trees, all the plants, all the planets, the suns, the galaxies, our bodies, everything is created at the same time. And because everything is created at the same time, comprising one frame, and it happens many times, many trillions of times per second, so in each one frame there cannot be any interaction between any two objects or two pixels. And across the frames, between one frame and the next frame, there cannot be any interaction, material causal interaction or physical interaction, because everything dissolves back into the UCP. And so the alternative, why I call it, or why it's been called the acausal computation paradigm, because the alternative is to say, okay, because the UCP is creating simultaneously the whole universe, and because the whole universe dissolves back into the UCP in between two frames, really there's no cause and effect. I gave a metaphor, I'll give it again. If you saw in a film progression a glass cup, and a hammer hitting the glass cup and shattering it, and then the water is spilled over the table, it seems like cause and effect. But really what's happening is the director of the film is arranging the frames in such a manner that gives us the illusion, the impression that there is a cause and effect. But as we said, there cannot be any cause and effect, because in each one of those frames, the two objects, the glass cup and the hammer, are presented simultaneously. Even when they're touching, by the way, they're presented simultaneously. Therefore, there cannot be any cause and effect, because cause and effect implies that the cause, in this case the hammer, is preceding its shattering of the glass, is preceding the spillage of the water. But here they're presented all the time simultaneously. So what we're seeing is that the acausal computation paradigm of God's physics tells us there's no cause and effect. There is a producer of the film that's arranging the film frames in such a manner that gives us the impression or the illusion as if there is cause and effect. Really, there is an arrangement of the frames by the producer. I'll say another two or three postulates of God's physics new paradigm, and then we'll talk about living in a world of Geulah, because science essentially is telling us that Geulah is here, that the new God's physics paradigm is pointing at, and I'll get into that in a second, the perfected state of the ultimate perfected state of the universe, towards which the Universal Computational Consciousness Principle, the UCP, has pre-planned and is evolving the whole universe towards that perfected Geulah state. But before that, maybe a few additional postulates very briefly. Another postulate which is profound is what I call the computational invariance principle and the universal consciousness reality. And essentially they're telling us that since we have to sort of open our minds and think about it for a while, and then it will become clear. Because the UCP exists during the frame, and it's actually computing for each atom in the universe, it's computing the four basic physical features of space, energy, time, and mass. Hard to conceive of that, but again, that's an infinite universal consciousness with infinite intelligence, etc. So the UCP is computing for each atom in the universe simultaneously the space, energy, time, mass values. And so we're reaching the point or the conclusion that since the UCP exists both during the frames, it's actually the thing that's creating the universe, that's computing and creating every atom in the universe. So it exists during the frames, and it also exists without the physical universe in between each two consecutive frames. And when we contrast the fact that the UCP exists continuously and uniformly, both during the frames in which it's computing every atom and its four basic physical features of space, energy, time, and mass, and it also exists in between the frames where the whole universe dissolved or has dissolved back into the UCP. But in contrast, so the UCP exists both during the frames and in between the frames. In contrast, every atom, every physical feature in the physical feature in the universe, the whole physical universe exists only during the frames as computed, solely dependent and completely animated and computed by the UCP, but it doesn't exist in between the frames in which it dissolves back to the UCP. So the conclusion, inevitable conclusion, which is profound, that's the computational invariance principle and also the universal conscious reality. The inevitable conclusion of God's physics new paradigm is telling us there's only one reality. That reality is the universal consciousness principle or reality. It exists both in between the frames without the presence of a physical universe, and exists during the frames in which it's actually creating the universe, creating all the atoms, computing all their space, energy, time, and mass values. So we're reaching a tantalizing conclusion. That tantalizing conclusion, profound conclusion, tells us there's no universe that exists separately from the universal consciousness reality. The only reality that exists is the universal consciousness reality or principle, UCP, and it's manifesting as the universe. It's creating the universe as a manifestation of itself during the frames, and then it dissolved the universe back into itself. So there's only one reality. That reality is the universal computational / consciousness principle or reality. And the universe, really, our world, our bodies, everything is just a manifestation or a creation, transient, phenomenal creation or appearance of this singular, higher ordered universal consciousness principle or reality. And then we move on to the moral principle and to Geulah. And then we'll speak about living in Geulah, living in a world of Geulah, which is the topic of today's presentation. So another postulate, which is actually the first time, it's a big discovery in physics. For the first time in physics, we have a moral principle that I call it the dynamic equilibrium moral principle, but essentially that moral principle determines for the it's computed obviously by the UCP, the universal consciousness principle, but the dynamic equilibrium moral principle, this moral principle, for the first time in physics, actually postulates that the UCP or UCR, the universal consciousness principle or reality, possesses a series of a bank or a series of universal frames of all the past, present, and multiple possible futures for each individual human being, based on the moral selection, the moral choices that we make. In other words, I give an illustrative example. I said there is in the book. I said there is a CEO that's now driving to an annual board meeting in which he's supposed to get a big prize bonus for his accomplishments during the last year. And lo and behold, on his way to that meeting, there is a car accident, God forbid, and he sees a person injured on the road. And provided that he can assist that person, he has a choice, he has a moral choice. Either he's going to stop and postpone the meeting or cancel the meeting, apologize and try to rescue that person's life, or he would find excuses why he cannot do it, why somebody else has to do it. That moral choice, according to the new God's physics paradigm, is guiding the UCP's dynamic equilibrium moral principle to create or select one of multiple possible futures for that benevolent CEO, because if that CEO made the right moral choice and decided to postpone or cancel the meeting to save that person's life or try to save that person's life, I mentioned that there's a Jewish wisdom tradition saying everybody. This is by Maimonides, the great eagle and one of the great sages and leaders of the Jewish people. And he said that a Jewish person or a person, should view themselves as if they're standing on the scales, and the scales are just at the point where one moral or good choice of this Jewish person or person, individual human being, would tilt himself and the whole universe into goodness, and vice versa. So in other words, if our CEO made the right moral choice and chose to postpone the meeting and go and try to save that person's life by putting him in his car and rushing to the hospital, in that case, the UCP will choose for that for that saving individual. The UCP would choose for that individual an equivalent situation, God forbid, that they would be endangered and their life would be spared as well, and vice versa. So we see that in the first time in physics, we have a moral principle that really guides and determines what would be our future or next present future based on our moral choices. And now we reach the postulate about Geulah. I called it initially the reverse time Geulah goal postulate or hypothesis, and it's a very beautiful and profound postulate which would lead us to our understanding and discussion of living in a Geulah perfected world. This is the beginning of this state, actually. In any event, the Geulah postulate essentially says that, I give the metaphor that if King Solomon when he was planning to build the temple, he had to take an architect, a very good architect, that would present to King Solomon a blueprint of how the completed temple would look like. And King Solomon had to like it and approve it in order for the temple to be constructed. We cannot fathom a situation that the construction workers of this immaculate temple would start working and then they would figure out how and if to create a temple. It wouldn't work. And so the metaphor is that in the same way that King Solomon had to have an architect with a blueprint before beginning the whole build-up of the temple, leading to that perfected Geulah state, leading to the completion of the temple according to the blueprint. In the same manner, God's physics paradigm, new 21st century scientific paradigm, is telling us that the universal consciousness principle reality has also pre-planned the whole evolution of the universe from the end result, which is Geulah, this perfected state that I'm going to talk about, of humanity and of science. So before the whole progression started, the whole creation of the universe, the universal conscious reality already had a blueprint of the Geulah, of the ultimate perfected humanity state, and actually has pre-planned the whole development of the universe from inanimate matter, animate plants, animals, human beings, the Jewish people, of course, having a key central role, and then Geulah, perfected state. So instead of being angry, this essentially tells us that anything that happens in our life is guided now by the moral principle, our choices, and the universal conscious reality, essentially creating situations that would reward us for our moral good behavior, and would teach us. We would normally say punish us, but it's not a punishment. It's really a form of teaching us and opening our eyes that if we acted in an immoral manner towards another human being, God forbid, then the UCP or UCR would create an equivalent situation that we would have to experience that negative situation, so that we will have remorse, do teshuvah. That's again a Jewish Hasidic term, implying a person making conscious remorse and conscious choice not to repeat any immoral action or choice, and actually to act in a moral manner. So we start now seeing that the whole universe, according to God's physics new paradigm, the whole creation of the universe and its evolution has been guided and is being guided by the universal conscious reality towards the perfected Geulah state. Let me speak about the perfected Geulah state for a few minutes. According to God's physics new paradigm, the Geulah perfected state, Geulah is a term denoting, you may say, redemption, or a perfected moral, spiritual, and even physical state. And the characteristics of this Geulah state are that we realize that God's physics, singular, higher ordered, universal conscious reality, is steering humanity towards that point of Geulah in which science and humanity will recognize the singular existence, the singular reality behind the universe, which is universal conscious reality. It would recognize some of the characteristics of this singular, higher ordered universal conscious reality, which is all goodness, which is steering humanity towards a perfected Geulah state, which is characterized by peace, harmony, morality, which is characterized also by, as I said, by the moral principle. So the Geulah state is when humanity and science are reaching the point in which science and humanity are recognizing the oneness of creation as being underlied by this universal conscious reality. It's recognizing the fact that this universal conscious reality is typified by all goodness, by morality, by peace and harmony. And again, steering the universe towards a perfected Geulah state in which all of humanity will live in peace and harmony, will understand that we're all part of this universal conscious reality and really we're not separate from each other. So I think we're ready now to start speaking about the fact that we have reached the Geulah is here. This one of the topics of the last conversations was Geulah is here. God's physics new paradigm encourages to do what the Lubavitcher Rebbe has been calling us all along and is calling us to open our eyes and see that Geulah is here. And this is what I want to focus on now, that we are, science and humanity have entered now a new phase, exciting phase of Geulah. And what does that mean? How do we live within Geulah? What does it mean to live within Geulah? First of all, we have to acknowledge the fact that because there's already two initial empirical validations of two critical predictions, unique critical predictions of God's physics new paradigm for the 21st century as more valid than relativity theory and quantum mechanics. And in brackets I will mention the fact that it appears at the bottom of the book, but you see here there's a universal consciousness formula. The new God's physics paradigm has been able to unify and integrate between relativity theory and quantum mechanics within one formula, which for the first time in physics unifies the four basic physical features of space, energy, time, and mass between the four basic forces of the weak and strong electromagnetic force, the electromagnetic force, and the gravitational force. So right now, with the empirical validation of God's physics, two critical predictions, we as more valid than the old predictions of relativity theory and quantum mechanics. And again, relativity theory and quantum mechanics become special cases, are embedded within the new model, the new universal computational formula. So science has reached a point where we realize now that the valid new scientific paradigm for 21st century is God's physics. And because God's physics has been recognized as more valid than the old relativity theory and quantum mechanics, and because God's physics points at the evolution of the universe towards that Geulah perfected state, and actually characterizes the Geulah perfected state as a state in which humanity and science, or science and humanity, will actually recognize the oneness and the singularity, the singular existence, the sole existence of this universal conscious reality. And we're at that point. In other words, science is recognizing, as I said, part of the postulates of God's physics paradigm, the computational invariance and universal conscious reality postulates. Science is recognizing now the singular existence of God's physics new paradigm, and therefore of the Geulah state, the Geulah perfected state. And we are at the point where really science is teaching humanity that we've begun the ultimate perfected state of Geulah. And so we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean? And by personal providence, since we're just at the end of Nisan, the month of redemption of the Jewish people, and the beginning of Iyar, it's by personal providence that we now are focusing on what does it mean to live in the Geulah perfected state. By the way, when the Jewish people left Egypt and became free as a nation, and then received the Torah, etc., when that happened, that was Geulah, that was redemption. And in a sense, the ultimate perfected state of the universe, which is the Geulah state, it's not by chance that we're talking about it right now in Hasidic thought, and in this theory, actually, this we will talk about it in a second. We realize that nothing happens by chance, and the way that we look at the world through this new Geulah state is very different. So I want to talk about a little bit about this. What does it mean to live in Geulah? And I give a metaphor. It's a nice metaphor to explain what's the difference between living in the old material causal paradigm. In Hasidic or Jewish terminology, that would be galut, like exile or darkness. It's not seeing the real reality. What's the difference between that galus or galut or darkness and the new paradigm, which is really of redemption, of light, of a perfected, truthful, and realized new universe, new Geulah universe. So I want to speak about what does it mean to live within a Geulah universe, living in Geulah or living in a Geulah universe. So I give a very nice metaphor to explain that. I said, imagine a person. We're now at the beginning of spring, and I said, imagine a person going out into the fields, beautiful fields filled with birds and flowers, and the skies are blue, and animals are walking, and everything looks very, very beautiful. Human beings are walking through the woods and the fields, etc. But the thing is, the metaphor goes that if a person has, let's say, black binoculars or glasses placed on their eyes, they could go out into the fields, but they wouldn't see light, and they wouldn't see all the beautiful flowers and birds and butterflies, etc. They wouldn't see anything. They would see darkness. That's a metaphor for those dark glasses of galus, of galut, of the old material causal paradigm and the old way of looking at the universe. And those black glasses have to be changed, have to be replaced by pure and bright glasses that allow us to see the reality. So what are those glasses, dark glasses of galus, of the old darkened or dark way of looking at the universe? That would be, there's three assumptions. One of them is the materiality of the universe. The old material causal paradigm, as we said, assumes that the universe is a static material entity. Everything is comprised of atoms. Everything is comprised of suns and galaxies, material entities. But the new paradigm, God's physics paradigm, is telling us, actually, no, atoms do not exist. Atoms dissolve between one frame and another. Planets, the planets, the galaxies, the plants, the animals, human beings, everything around us actually melts and dissolves in between one frame and another. So we cannot any longer hold fast to the idea that the universe is a material entity. really the atoms and the molecules and the planets and galaxies and everything around us exists for a very short period of time. And when we really think about what I said earlier, the computational invariance and universal conscious reality postulates, we start realizing that the universe really exists as a manifestation of the only reality, which is this universal conscious reality. In religious terms, we will call it the power of God. But in any event, the idea is that the only thing that really exists continuously, and the only reality that exists, is this singular higher ordered universal conscious reality, which manifests as the physical universe during the frames and remains without the physical universe in between frames. That already starts taking off some of the darkness from our glasses to see Geulah, to start living in Geulah, because we start realizing that the whole universe is not material. It's actually the universal conscious reality that we're walking through. Everything that we're seeing around us is only this universal conscious reality. It appears as a table, it appears as atoms, it appears as our body. But really there's only one reality that's creating, dissolving, recreating, and evolving the whole universe. It's like a show, it's like a film that seems so real, but when we stop the progression of the film, we see it's not real as we think it is. It's the producer arranging a series of frames. In this case, the only reality behind the universe, the only real reality, is this universal conscious reality. So everything we're seeing around us is this universal conscious reality. And it doesn't exist as atoms. Atoms dissolves between one frame and another. That's number one assumption, materiality. It's replaced by, you may say, divinity, or you may say in scientific terms, replaced by this universal conscious reality, which is typified by all goodness, by morality, by peace and harmony. There's only one reality, that's universal conscious reality. The second assumption we have is material. We said material, causal paradigm, the old paradigm. Second assumption is causal. We saw that there cannot be any cause and effect. Remember the metaphor with the hammer and the glass cup. There cannot be any cause and effect. There's just an arrangement of the films by the producer in order to give us an appearance and give us the perception that there is cause and effect. But really there's only what we call personal providence. In other words, the universal conscious reality is arranging the series of frames of the universe, first of all from inanimate matter through animate plants, animals, human beings, and towards that perfected Geulah state. It's like a producer of a film that has pre-planned and knows the whole plot of the film and is leading the plot of the film to reach the ultimate destination or ultimate punchline or educational motto of the film. It's all been pre-planned, and the whole film is led by this scenario that the producer of the film wants to teach us. Similar to that would be, instead of thinking that the universe exists as a material causal entity, things happen by chance. The universe was created by a random chance Big Bang nuclear event, etc. Instead of assuming that, we said there is no cause and effect, but we may say there's personal providence. Again, a Hasidic term, but it denotes essentially that the universal conscious reality is evolving the universe not by chance. It's all guided. It's all been pre-planned. It's been watched over and cared for. So everything that happens in our life, everything that happens in the universe is not by chance, and there's no cause and effect in the regular manner. There is the producer of the film leading the film towards the ultimate Geulah perfected state. There is the producer of the film, the UCR, universal conscious reality, helping us to open our eyes and see that we're not separate from this universal conscious reality. The morality principle teaches us that, in the same way, I said that in previous presentations, same way that a normal person would not take the right hand to inflict pain on the left hand because it's part of themselves. The same manner, universal conscious reality is teaching humanity about the moral principle, which is supposed to open our eyes and realize that in the same way that I wouldn't take my right hand to inflict pain on the left hand, the universal conscious reality is teaching us that we are all human beings are like the right hand and left hand. We're all inseparable parts of this universal conscious reality. and we know about the moral principles. So I know that I should not harm another person. First of all, because if I do that, God forbid, the universal conscious reality will create a situation in which I will have to experience that pain or suffering, God forbid. So I start realizing I'm not separate from another human being. I can't inflict pain on them, because like the right hand and left hand, we're part of the same universal conscious reality. And so we start understand. So that's the second assumption, that instead of materiality, and then the second assumption is causality, there's no cause and effect in the regular manner. There is personal providence. The universal conscious reality is creating and watching over each one of us, is caring about our moral choices, is guiding us, is teaching us, is encouraging us to act in a moral manner. So it's everything that's happening in our life is personal providence. It doesn't happen by chance. It's actually all geared towards perfecting the world, perfecting ourselves, making us moral individuals, etc. And the third one is about Geulah, which we spoke about, that really the universal conscious reality is leading the whole universe towards a perfected Geulah state. And since it's leading the universe towards a perfected Geulah state, essentially it's we've reached the point of Geulah. So now we start realizing that we have to live in accordance with this universal conscious reality Geulah state, which means peace and harmony. We can't inflict pain on each other. We have to help each other. We have to live in peace and harmony, etc. So now we're starting to get the picture about what does it mean to live in a Geulah world. Living in a Geulah universe or world alters completely our way of thinking and behaving and perceiving and appreciating the universe. I may give a metaphor and say that, the old paradigm, the old way of looking at the world, which is more like galus, living in darkness, not seeing the reality. The old way of looking at the universe, if I had to give another metaphor, would be like a person entering into a palace, and the palace, there's been an electric short circuit, so the power is off. They cannot see the palace, or they see glimmers of light. They think it's a hut. They don't realize where they are. So they may act in a strange way. They may stumble and hit furniture accidentally. They may grapple in darkness and take some food. They don't know if it belongs to them or not. They don't know really what they're doing. The minute that the king of the palace gives an instruction to light up all the light bulbs in the palace and all the beautiful tabernacles, etc., then there's light, and they can start seeing. They stop bumping into furniture. B, they can appreciate the beauty of the palace, and C, they would start acting accordingly. Because obviously, if you're in a palace of a king, a great moral king, you wouldn't do anything to upset that king, and you know that you have to behave in a certain moral manner. And that's in a sense what we're entering now, because our eyes are opened through this breakthrough, through this new God's physics paradigm, and we start walking in the palace, so to speak, of God, or of this universal conscious reality. The whole universe becomes this palace. We start realizing that everything around us is this universal conscious reality, is a manifestation of this universal conscious reality. We start realizing that we live in personal providence, that nothing in our life can happen by chance, because things happen not because of material interaction. Things happen because the universal conscious reality is perfecting us morally and spiritually, is perfecting the whole universe and evolving it towards the Geulah state that we're actually at the beginning of this Geulah state. So we're starting to open our eyes and saying, wow, the universe, the world around us, our bodies, our family, our friends, even the plants, the animals, everything around us is really just a manifestation of this singular universal conscious reality. And we start living in awe, reverence, gratitude, respect, peace and harmony towards each other, because I realize the other person is part of this universal conscious reality. we're connected, and we ought to be connected in a moral manner. If I, God forbid, inflict pain or suffering on somebody else, then I will have to experience it unless I do teshuvah. I make this remorse and resolute decision not to repeat this wrongdoing. But we start living, we open our eyes and we start realizing the world, the universe is not material. It's really this all goodness, universal conscious reality. It's really this moral peace and harmony and Geulah driven universal conscious reality, which is appearing in our minds as a physical reality, as a random material interaction, physical reality. But I start realizing that's not the case. I start walking in the world and seeing Geulah, meaning I realize everything is this all goodness reality. Around me, everything is really underlined and is really a manifestation of this singular universal conscious reality, which is all goodness, which is moral, which is characterized by peace and harmony, and trying to and leading the world towards the Geulah perfected state. And the amazing thing is that we start realizing, we're opening our eyes, and we start realizing this is Geulah, and I ought to live in a manner that is harmonious and that is compatible with this new Geulah state. In Hebrew tradition, we based on Yeshaya, Isaiah prophecy, and others, and the Rambam, the Maimonides, who spoke about the perfected state, this Geulah perfected state, and they said, "Lo yisa goy el goy cherev v'lo yilmedu od milchama." There will be no wars in the world. There will be no swords and any aggression or weapons used. That's because the Geulah state is a state in which the oneness of God or the oneness of universal conscious reality is realized. And we start respecting everything we're seeing. We start having awe and reverence towards the all goodness of the universal conscious reality, or God, who is creating, sustaining, evolving life, is caring about our moral choices. And so it's a completely new universe. By the way, you may say that in the same manner that Einstein's general relativity theory gave great hope after the First World War, a new universe and new understanding. Remember also that that in and of itself gave great hope to humanity, because Einstein, who came from Germany, and Eddington, who came from England, they were rival in the war, and yet they collaborated, and Eddington assisted Einstein to discover and to validate his discovery of general relativity theory. And today I strongly believe that the discovery and validation of God's physics new paradigm, scientific paradigm for the 21st century, gives humanity great hope, because it highlights the fact that the world is not a jungle, so to speak. Morality is the moral principle is one of the characteristics of this universal conscious reality that's leading the world into Geulah. And even when we see this unfortunate war going on in Ukraine and the aggression towards the Ukrainian people, we know, and it actually gives us great hope by this God's physics new paradigm, that we start realizing that this form of aggression or wars will pass. Actually, the more that science and humanity will realize that we're not surrounded by atoms and a physical reality. We're surrounded and we live within a singular reality, higher reality, which is this universal conscious reality. And that universal conscious reality is all goodness, is moral, and it's leading the universe towards a perfected Geulah state, at which we are at the beginning of this phase. So it's a great pleasure really to record this presentation, especially for the beginning of Nisan Jewish month, and the end of the beginning of Iyar Jewish month, and the end of Nisan, the month of redemption for the Jewish people and eventually for the whole world. So thank you very much for watching this, and I think it gives us great hope and understanding that we start living within a Geulah perfected state. I would just add that this is a fulfillment, and this is exactly what the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the head of the Jewish people in this generation, has been encouraging us all the time, all along, to open our eyes and see that Geulah is here. Thank you very much.